Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. So a couple of days ago, FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr came out with a statement with some concerns he has about the Notice of Funding Opportunity that came out for the BEAD program. That's the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program. Be right back and I'll talk about that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So as I mentioned, Brendan Carr is a commissioner on the FCC, and he issued a statement a few days ago about the Notice of Funding Opportunity, basically the rules that will dictate how money can be spent for the BEAD program. Again, that's Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. That's the biggest chunk, the $42.5 or so billion that will be for broadband deployment, equity, access, etc. And affordability is wrapped up in that as well. So basically, he issued a statement, and I was just going to kind of read through this real quick and kind of give you my thoughts, comments on this. So you can see here, Carr concerned that administration's new broadband rules will waste taxpayer dollars and leave families waiting on the wrong side of the digital divide. Rules pursue extraneous political goals rather than focusing on connecting Americans. And you know, there is a history of federal money that's been, we've tried to throw federal money at the broadband issue for years. We had the BTOP program, we had CAF2, we had RDOF, we recently had ARPA. So lots of money has been thrown at this problem, and a lot of people look back at it and go, well, what do we have for that? In some cases, the money was not put into the best places. In some cases, people were concerned about maybe the methodology. Maybe, and of course, it's a moving target too. So, the definition of broadband years ago was not what it is today. Years ago, if you had a 10 meg down connection, that was fast, right? But of course, those things change over time. Now we've got a federal definition of 25 by 3, and most people look at that and go, that's not fast enough. It really needs to be 100. And people say 100 symmetrical, 100, at least 100 by 100. If not symmetrical, something by 100. So I think that changes, so that could be part of it, obviously. So he says, last week, the Commerce Department released new rules, that's the NOFO, that will govern the expenditure of $42.5 billion in grants authorized by Congress in the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law these days. Congress acted on a bipartisan basis for the purpose of quickly and efficiently extending high-speed internet service to all Americans. FCC Commissioner Carr is concerned that the Commerce Department's rules are not focused on delivering on that bipartisan goal. Instead, those rules deviate from the statute by preferencing one technology over another, head down the path towards rate regulation, and otherwise waste taxpayer dollars by pursuing extraneous political goals that will leave families waiting on the wrong side of the digital divide. So, and there's a little breakdown of those three concerns that he has. As Carr issued the following statement in response to the NOFO. Well, I've been pleased to see the broad bipartisan support for extending affordable high-speed internet service to every American. The Commerce Department's rules governing the expenditure of the funds will undoubtedly waste taxpayer dollars and leave families waiting on the wrong side of the digital divide. I can almost guarantee that there will undoubtedly be some wasting of money, unfortunately. Whenever you have a federal government, this huge bureaucracy, there's going to be wasting of money. Now, I have seen, it does seem like the NTIA, as far as the way they've spoken about this and some of the things in the rules, that they're really going to try to avoid wasting money. They're wanting to make sure that there's lots of, well, first of all, they're sending the money to the states, which is a good idea, because the states, best know about their state and where the broadband needs are, what's unserved, what's underserved, and then certainly, the local communities as well, and the states are supposed to engage. There's a lot in the NOFO about having to do engagement with local stakeholders, and that would be your local cities and towns, that would be community organizations and others that are on the ground in those small areas that could be unserved or underserved. So they're trying to make sure that that information flows up, that the federal government's just not coming right out and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to do this the same way for everybody. They're focusing on the states and letting the states then have some leeway on how they handle the money. So that's a good thing. But again, there's going to be some wasted money whenever you have this much money. Some of it's going to be wasted on purpose, unfortunately, or through fraud. That's just going to happen. And then some is going to be just not the best decisions made. We'll have to see how it goes. But again, they're trying to put in as many safeguards as possible. The Commerce Department's rules do this by effectively negating the bipartisan decision Congress reached in the Infrastructure Act to refrain from picking winners and losers when it comes to the technologies that can deliver robust, high-speed internet services. Indeed, the Infrastructure Act's lead drafters made clear that the statute does not favor particular technologies or providers, yet the Commerce Department's rules are based in favor of one technology and one set of providers. So I think what he's referring to there is there really is a thumb on the scale for fiber in this, and you can make an argument that that they shouldn't be doing that. And I think if you read through it, there is a thumb on the scale, but they leave other technologies open. They do leave some leeway to the states. But fiber really is the best technology if it's reasonable. So I think that's important. And I think he mentions that here, that is the best technology if possible. So, but he has concerns that there's other things being left out here. So he says the decision by the Commerce Department will unfortunately leave families stuck waiting on the wrong side of the digital divide. Indeed, we have a range of next-gen technologies that can offer robust, affordable, high-speed internet services from 5G to fixed wireless to a new generation of LEO satellites or low Earth orbit satellites. So 5G would be, maybe he's speaking of 5G mobile there, but then fixed wireless, a lot of the fixed wireless technologies that will be deployed for broadband will be over 5G, mid-band spectrum, some millimeter wave spectrum. There is, for example, in the NOFO, it says that if you're going to be offering wireless service and you want to get funds, it has to be licensed spectrum. So there, CBRS, for example, CBRS spectrum is available to operators on an unlicensed basis. They can do that, and there's spectrum sharing technology in place to hopefully manage any interference or contention issues with CBRS. There are licensed CBRS. There's licensed CBRS spectrum as well, but you can do unlicensed. And of course, we're trying to keep the cost of broadband down. So having to purchase licensed spectrum, that just means somebody's costs are higher. So I'm not sure why the unlicensed, unless they're concerned that it won't be reliable. Again, because if you've got unlicensed, maybe then you're going to have more contention. Because it's kind of the wild, wild west. But again, with CBRS, there's spectrum sharing technology in place that's supposed to take care of that. Where systems will make one radio back off if it sees their interference, and then it can switch to another part of the spectrum, that kind of thing. As far as LEO satellites, so that would be something like SpaceX, their Starlink stuff. Then you've got Amazon Kuiper is going to be doing that. OneWeb, some others that are doing low Earth orbit satellites, and they do provide fast internet. They provide relatively low latency. Starlink is very close to what wired connections are at, so they do provide good service. I think the concern is that they will be kind of limited. There's only so much you can do, I think, even with low Earth orbit satellites, and the amount of data that you can run across that satellite infrastructure, trying to think of the word for all the satellites up in there, the constellation. So that's a concern. And then, are you locking then that area into maybe top speeds of, maybe they can do over 100 by 20, which has been shown. Starlink speed tests over Ookla, it's shown that they do tend to do over 100 by 20. Now, after they launch that and they get a lot of subscribers on there, sometimes that dips back down, but then they launch more satellites and it goes back up. So it's hovering around that. But the concern would be, that if you just said, okay, well, there's a satellite up there, we don't need to be doing fiber, then you're kind of locking that area into, let's say, 100 to 150 megabits per second, versus they could maybe get a gig with fiber. So I think that's the concern there as to why the NTIA came out and said low Earth satellite service will not qualify. Now, maybe they should have left it open, for certain circumstances, because there are going to be certain circumstances where satellite is going to be the only option. But then again, there's not really a build out, right? So, I guess you could fund additional satellites going up to support more subscribers. But once the satellite constellation's up there, it's up there. So there's not like a build out situation. So that's the concern there that I think he has. But although I think, again, they want to make sure that fiber, being the most future-proof technology, is hopefully what's rolled out. And again, this is part of hopefully saving money over the long term, right? If you put fiber in the ground, then you don't need, if you go ahead and put in, let's say, DSL, that's, well, actually DSL is allowed, surprisingly, but if you put some kind of technology out or up that's only going to expand so far, then later on, as needs grow, then you may have to upgrade the technology. So we're trying to keep this to where this is a people say once in a generation. It's probably once ever kind of, I don't think we're going to be doing this again. So we want to use this money in the best way possible. But the Commerce Department's rules will prevent states from funding projects that could quickly bridge the digital divide using those high-speed technologies in nearly all cases. Putting too much of a thumb on the scale for fiber bills that provide robust service but can take years to build out in certain cases. There's a point there to be made in that, a lot of what we're seeing now as we start to see where's unserved and underserved in some of these areas that are not being looked at. There's a lot of areas that are being looked at now where people are starting to build out or whatever, but there are areas that, they're going to be starting from scratch. So those areas, it's going to take a while for them to get service. So there is that point that if you say, well, it's just going to be fiber and we can't do unlicensed mid-band spectrum, then that does kind of drag out how long it's going to take them to get broadband. And certainly, if there's a satellite up there, somebody can get broadband. It's just a question of whether they can afford it, right? So we don't need to be funding that. I understand that. We don't need to be funding satellite. If the satellite's up there, somebody can get it. Maybe the question is, can they afford it? And then maybe something can be done there by the states that say, even if it's not under this program, that say, if you are in an area that's unserved right now, we will give you a subsidy to get, for example, low Earth orbit satellite service. Fiber is a great technology, and it should continue to be widely deployed and broadly supported, but time matters, and a build completed years from now will not help a family that needs a robust, high-speed connection today. Again, good point. Fiber is, I think he's agreeing, fiber is the way to go, but it will mean a lengthy time. That is why the Commerce Department should have hewed to the Infrastructure Act and provided states with greater flexibility to pick the right technology based on a range of circumstances and considerations, including speed of build. Even with that additional flexibility, I have no doubt that fiber projects would demonstrate their value in the lion's share of cases. So he's agreeing there, and it's true. In most cases, fiber is going to be the way to go. There's going to be some specific situations where it's just not going to be practicable, and in that case, I think it's going to wind up being fixed wireless licensed spectrum if anybody's going to be getting funds for that. If not, people are going to come in with unlicensed spectrum, and they're not going to be getting federal dollars to do that. Continues, the problems compound from there. While the Infrastructure Act made clear that the law does not permit any rate regulation, the Commerce Department's implementing rules head down that path anyways, and there's no better way to sideline needed investment than to raise the specter of price controls. And what he's talking about there is this requirement for low-cost broadband and some of the things that I think the NTIA says in the NOFO. So for example, every operator that takes funds on this is going to be required to have a low-cost plan. The FCC doesn't specifically say what that is. They do leave some leeway to the states on how to define that, but then the states and the providers have to get back to the NTIA and say, here's what we think is a low-cost plan, and there's going to be back and forth on that. So the federal government is definitely getting involved in saying, it's not, I wouldn't, how does he refer to it here? Rate regulations, it's not quite there, but they are definitely trying to get involved in determining pricing for these service providers. So I understand his concerns here, but then again, affordability is a big part of the act. And he says, again, there's no better way to sideline investment than to raise the specter of price controls. Well, it does dampen that somewhat, although there's so much money involved that I don't think providers are going to turn down the amount of money they can get if it means that they're going to have to, implement a low-cost plan, as long as it's not going to be something that's going to cost them money in the long run. It says, I'm also concerned by the many ways in which the Commerce Department's rules will waste scarce taxpayer dollars. It talks about overbuilding as just one example. For instance, the FCC announced back in 2020 the winning bidders in a multi-billion-dollar round of funding for federal subsidies to support the delivery of high-speed internet service to underserved or unserved communities. Yet the Commerce Department's rules state that they would treat many of those areas as unserved nonetheless. I think he's probably talking about RDOF there. But, I mean, if you read the NOFO, it says that if a RDOF has been considered ready to authorized or authorized, then you can't overbuild that. So I'm assuming that the FCC is going to do their best. Obviously, they're trying to get the maps in place, but the FCC, who would be awarding these RDOF dollars, I'm assuming they're going to try their best to get all of the RDOF money allocated that they feel they should be allocating. So that would mean, there's a lot that was won by Starlink. They're probably not going to get that at all, or maybe only in very select areas where it will take a long time, or maybe never get fiber because they're just so difficult. Like if you've got really mountainous areas, it's going to be really hard to do fiber. Very expensive to run. So, and it's hard to do wireless in some cases in areas like that. So maybe, if somebody's at their house and they have a clear shot at the sky, they can get Starlink, and maybe that would be an area that something somehow could be done. But I think for the most part, like I say, the FCC is going to probably try to have most of this money accounted for and everybody ready to authorize or authorized by the time that the FCC maps are determined. The final FCC maps come out and say, okay, here's where unserved is underserved and underserved are. And in that case, these areas that are already pending for construction, I think, will be part of that map, and those will no longer be considered unserved or underserved. That's my guess. Now the question comes up with what happens with the rest of the money that hasn't been allocated. All of the money, let's say, that may have been going to Starlink, or all of the money that may have been going to, I forget there was another large company, can't think of it, it's 3 letters. But anyway, they were like one of the biggest winners, and they've yet to receive a dime, and they also were fined for not setting up an ETC on time. So, what happens with that money? And then how long does it take for the FCC to, are they just gonna not award that to anybody, or are they gonna let other people then bid for that or come in and do that? How long does that take? And then what happens there? Because we've got then these 2 competing programs that are trying to award money at the same time. So there is definitely the chance of that, and that may be what he's talking about. Let's see. This means that federal dollars may soon go towards building high-speed internet service in communities where the federal government is already funding a different provider to deliver high-speed internet service. I don't think it'll be that. I don't think the funds will already be out there. It's just a question of, what does the FCC do at that point? Do they authorize in these areas or not? Since that makes no sense, given that there are too many parts of the country that still have no internet service at all. And the NTIA has said that their goal is to make sure that every single American, when this is all over, has access to high-quality, affordable broadband service, that nobody's unserved or underserved. Before, they said that before they would authorize any kind of overbuilding, they didn't take overbuilding off the table. So if they determine that every area that's unserved or underserved is going to have at least 100 by 20, but maybe one area only has one provider, they might then allow some of those funds to go to overbuilding. And that would be to help drive prices down. The Commerce Department rules also pursue a melange of extraneous political objectives that are unrelated to connecting Americans today. They include undue preferences for labor unions, government-run networks, and a Byzantine application process that will invite the imposition of additional conditions unrelated to quickly delivering high-speed service. So again, as a fiscal conservative myself and a small government guy, I know where he's coming from on this too. So I read through the NOFO and I see things about the climate, I forget what it was called, climate resiliency, I can't remember. But so there's a lot of Democrat kind of points in here that they kind of threw into this. So that is always a concern because, again, small government, fewer regulations keeps prices down actually, because if you have fewer regulations, then you're not having to worry about all of these things that these mandates that you've got to take into place. So I understand his points there as well. So in the end, the administration's decision to pursue those political goals rather than focusing on connecting the largest number of people as quickly as possible will exacerbate the supply chain challenges and workforce shortages that already pose a hurdle in getting the job done. So again, if you're really focused on the labor situation if it's got to be a labor union, or really putting the thumb on the scale for that, and you've got workforce shortages already, then that does hinder things. So we just need to make sure that people that want to work, because we want this to be a job creation thing as well. People that want to work can get a job. They just need to make sure that they're trained. And I don't think they necessarily need to be in a labor union to do that. We need to make sure that these are shovel-ready kind of projects as much as possible, and then that people that want to get jobs can. And this is really a great opportunity for a lot of people to get that maybe have had a hard time because whatever industry they were in is just no longer relevant anymore. And here we've got the new broadband industry, lots of money, fiber, lots of opportunity for people that want to maybe go out and work in this industry. So let's make sure that we take advantage of that. So anyway, that's his concern, and that's coming from the other side of the aisle. So I saw that, thought I'd read through that, just comment on it. Thanks for joining me. Tomorrow, I'll do broadband deployment news again at some point during the day. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button. Click the little bell to be notified on your desktop or on your phone when I'm live. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up. I appreciate you joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.